Hello everybody, it's Verda here, and today we're going to be benchmarking Call of Duty Cold War with the RTX 3060 Ti with the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D with 32GB of DDR5, 6000 MHz RAM. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump in. And I am using the latest Nvidia drivers at the moment, so yeah, let's get into the game and start benchmarking. Alright, and to get us started here, we're going to be playing at 1080p. I am using the maximum settings in the game. It says, let's have a look here, because it has a habit of turning settings down when you enable them. So we're not using ray tracing yet. We'll try that later on. We've got DLSS turned off. So yeah, everything is at ultra. Motion blur is turned off, of course. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump on in. So I'm benchmarking this in Zombies solo because it's the only game mode that I play is Zombies. But the thing is, this game had some issues with hacking and some other security issues and so on, so I don't know if that's still a thing. I'm really not sure. So just to play it safe, I just decided to come here into a solo match in Zombies. So as you can see here anyways, at 1080p, just to get us started, the game feels really smooth. Maximum settings were about 100 frames, which this game came out, was it 2021 or was it 2020? I can't remember. So the game is a few years old, which some people may be wondering, why are you benchmarking such an old game? But I'm benchmarking it because it's still got a pretty active player base. You know, the community that does play it, they are pretty active in the Call of Duty community with these older games. And I don't really think there's a Zombies game mode right now that has kind of replaced Cold War, if that makes sense. Like, yes, Cold War is not exactly like the best Zombies we've ever had, but it definitely has a charm to it. I like certain aspects of this game, and so that's why I'm benchmarking it, because I know there's people who still play it and who are still interested in it, and I actually just wanted to come and play it as well. So as you can see here with the RTX 3060 Ti, we are completely bottlenecked in this game, of course, as to be expected. I wasn't expecting the CPU to be bottlenecking us here at 1080p with the ultra settings for sure. But in terms of VRAM usage, it is using quite a lot, you know, for a game that is like 4 years old. It's using quite a lot of VRAM. We're pretty much just over 6 gigs, nearly 6.5 gigs here, which, you know, it's definitely up there. So even back in the day, you needed to have, well, I say back in the day, even a couple of years ago, you really needed to have like an 8 gig card to play, right? And we're getting to a point where a lot of AAA title like games now are just releasing, and you can't even like play them with an 8 gig card at very good settings, essentially. So it's certainly getting there. It's certainly, you know, moving ahead. I played this game. This is the game that actually made me upgrade my old gaming PC, not to the PC that I have now. When I started playing this game, I still had an Intel Core i5 4690, if I'm remembering that correct. It wasn't the K version. I still had that CPU, and I had the GTX 1060 that you guys see me benchmark. I had that in my system, and basically my CPU was a pretty big bottleneck back then. And so that made me upgrade to the i7 4790K because I didn't want to have to upgrade my entire system. So I was like, well, what's the best CPU that I can get for my motherboard, right? And so that's why I got the i7. It was a marginal upgrade, but it definitely increased my FPS in this game substantially compared to the bottleneck that I was getting. But that's enough about that PC and that. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a story about why I have the i7, basically, compared to what I used to have. And I used to play this with 8 gigs of RAM, I believe. It made me upgrade my RAM too. Yeah. So, and I believe this is the game that also made me get the 3060 Ti, because when I upgraded my i7, I'm pretty sure my 3060 or my 1060 GPU was then the bottleneck quite a bit as well. So I'll have to benchmark it again on here. I haven't played Cold War with the 1060 in a very long time. So yeah. And if you're wondering, the i7 bottlenecked the 3060 Ti quite a bit in this game. So it was a bit of a bottlenecking mess. You know, I went from one bottleneck to the next. But yeah, as you can see here, 1080p, it's more than playable at ultra settings. Not really high, like not really high into the hundreds, just barely at 100 FPS most of the time, but it still feels completely fine. And I normally play FPS games at 140 hertz plus. So yeah, this still feels totally fine here though, at like 115, 120. So let's try 1440p, the resolution that I usually play at. Alright, so now we're at 1440p using the maximum settings in the game. This menu has this weird thing where it like stutters along, and also has a huge amount of like FPS drops as you change settings. But yeah, we're at 1440p maximum settings, no ray tracing yet. So let's see what it's like. All right, I got myself some double points. Come on, I haven't played this game in a while. In all honesty, it's one of my favorite games, but I've not played it in a long time. I actually don't play many games these days, to be honest with you. I don't spend that much time playing. I usually just spend a lot of time researching benchmarks and benchmarking, in all honesty. Like, I'm not even kidding. I actually spend a lot less time playing games now that I benchmark. Because believe it or not, the videos take a lot of research. You know, it's not as simple as just coming on, playing the game, and then calling it a day, editing the video, making the thumbnail, uploading it. There's a lot more that goes into it. Hours upon hours of testing in games that I'm not familiar with, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of games that I benchmark which I'm not familiar with, and they take a lot of time to get familiarized with what's intensive in the game and what settings are doing and stuff. I put that ammo way too early. But yeah, anyways, as you can see here, 1440p, we are seeing around 70 to 80 FPS, sometimes nearly 90, which is definitely not the highest frame rate. You know, some people will want a much higher frame rate than that, but here in Call of Duty, for me at least, this feels totally fine. I think for Call of Duty, or like any sort of FPS where it's like an FPS but a PvE kind of FPS, I think anything above like 75 still feels pretty good, in all honesty. Now, if I was playing at 60 FPS, I'd probably feel it, but yeah, it still feels pretty good here at around 70 to 80 FPS. It doesn't feel bad. You can definitely feel that it's not as smooth as 100, 120, but by no means would I say like, oh, I don't want to play the game because of this FPS. I still feel like it's good. You know what I mean? Like, I still feel like it's good enough. And I haven't even spoken about the RAM yet. The RAM usage is quite high. So yeah, you can totally see why I was having issues with my 8 gig system in this game. Because right now we're using nearly 22 gigs of RAM, and I had 8 gigs at the time when I used to play this at first. At least I believe I did. I might be remembering that wrong, but I upgraded all of my old gaming PC at a similar time. This is still totally fine. We might try lowest settings just to see what you can achieve if you really want to have the lowest settings and get the highest FPS possible. We might try that out, but that's going to do for 1440p, because yeah, it's completely fine. I'm not expecting 4K to be very good though. Alright, so now we're at 4K resolution, maximum settings. Probably not going to be expecting too much here. It's probably not going to be too great, but let's try it out anyways. Yeah, we're at like 30, 40 FPS. This is actually very similar FPS to what I played this at with the i5 4690 with the GTX 1060. This is literally what I played it at 1080p. It was a little bit more FPS than this, maybe 4 or 5 more FPS, but I used to play the game like this when it originally came out on my really budget end PC. So that was fun times, question mark. Not really. But yeah, as you can see here, it's really not a pleasant experience. The VRAM usage has jumped up to nearly 7 gigs of VRAM, which is still fine for the 8 gigs that we have. But yeah, this is not playable, guys. I wouldn't say for zombies, for sure. I'm having a hard time here. These lower refresh rates actually hurt my eyes these days, to be completely honest with you. Yeah. So that's going to do it for 4K. It's not good. Alright, so we're back to 1080p. We're still using the maximum settings in the game. Menu's still stuttering, it just does this. But now we're using DLSS on quality. We won't go below that. It's arguable if you actually want to use DLSS at all at 1080p, but I'm sure some of you are interested in it. So yeah, let's try it out. Yeah, you can certainly see the FSR when I move. Look at that tree specifically right there. You see the blurriness? Not great, but in terms of FPS jump, we have gained about 20 to 40 FPS depending on what's going on where I'm looking. I know for a fact that looking at the map there is more intensive than looking at those trees there. So those trees, like that area there, is really not intensive, and I've figured this out through all the years of playing this game. Like, looking over this way is really not intensive, but looking at the actual map over here is more intensive. in all honesty, it looks like we've gained about 30 to 40 FPS turning DLSS on at 1080p. Now, I could be wrong on that. I could be remembering the 1080p Ultra settings wrong, but yeah, we've gained like at least 20 plus FPS, if not around 40 FPS on average, which is pretty insane. Am I out of bullets? I'm out of bullets. That's okay, guys. We got mollies. That's okay. We don't need bullets for zombies. I'm telling you, when we get snooped. But we're still at this frame rate, still GPU bound, as to be expected. I actually don't know what this CPU is capable of in this game. I've not actually tested what this CPU is capable of in this particular game here, so we'll try that out for sure. We'll see what it is actually capable of at some point in the benchmark. We'll lower the settings down to an insane amount. What do you knife? My knife hotkey is different. It's actually on the mouse, but yeah, still totally fine here. You can expect to see like 20 to 40 more FPS on average, which is just kind of insane. Let's get all these points. There we go. Not bad. Let's switch it to 1440p. Alright, so now we're at 1440p, still at maximum settings, menu still doing its little stutters, and yeah, we're at DLSS quality, which I wouldn't really say you need to go lower than that for 1440p, so let's try it out. Oh wow, this is MIDI. Pretty big difference to the FPS here. This is kind of insane. Like, we were at what, 70, 80 FPS? And now we're like 100, 110. We're getting very similar frame rate to 1080p native, essentially. It's pretty good FPS for 1440p for a game like Zombies, in all honesty. Now, playing online, PvP, you know, the multiplayer game mode, you probably want higher FPS there, but still, like, this is totally fine. I wouldn't have an issue playing at this FPS for Zombies. Absolutely, for sure. The knife is still really strong right now. I think it starts to be a two-shot, like round 12 or 13 or something. Yeah, I used to do a lot of knifing in this game, so pretty proficient at it. Oh, I say that and instantly get hit. But yeah, 1440p, around averages of around 115 here, which is just absolutely insane. So let's see what we can get with 4K, because it wasn't actually playable at native 4K. So we'll try it out with DLSS. We have the DLSS set to quality. We'll try some lower presets as well, because with the 4K resolution, you can turn DLSS down a little bit more in some games. So we'll try that out with some lower settings too. Playing here at 4K resolution with DLSS on quality, we're actually able to get around like 70 FPS. We're not counting looking over there. That doesn't count. That's easiest part of the map to run. Looking over there, that does not count. Looking over here counts. So like mid 60s, 70 FPS. When we get some zombies spawning in, I'm sure it's going to get a little bit more intensive. VRAM usage is a little bit lower than native 4K, it would seem. All right, we got the zombies coming in. It's time to rock and roll. Let's just go ahead and bounce a grenade off this wall. Get the zombies hit with it. What a beautiful grenade. That actually took most of my life away. That's not great. For zombies, this is pretty good. Like, for me, I would want a little bit more FPS than like 65. I'd want 70, 75, which is not much more, but it does make quite a big difference in how smooth the game feels. My gun is starting to really drop off here, but yeah, for a lot of people, this is probably completely fine to play at this kind of FPS, like 60, nearly 70. But let's try out another DLSS option just to see what it's capable of. Plus, the image still looks really good. It's not as bad as like using DLSS at 1440p or 1080p. So yeah, image still looks decent. Let's try out another setting. All right, so we're still at 4K resolution. We're using ultra settings / maximum settings still, but we've just gone ahead and turned the DLSS to performance. And it actually recommended here, recommended 4K gameplay. So we'll see. We're not going to try out balanced or ultra performance. We're just going to stick to performance and quality. Okay. So FPS actually did not increase that much. Going from... Oh god, nearly dead. Just keep running. So it looks like FPS has actually gone up to around 80 to 90 FPS here at performance DLSS. Image quality has decreased a little bit, but it's honestly, it feels like it's just gotten a lot darker, you know, like a lot more muddy looking. Like, I'm not really sure how to describe it. It certainly still looks fine, like it still looks playable, you know what I mean? Like, I don't really think it looks that bad. But yeah, this is totally fine, playable FPS. I don't think the game looks that terrible, and realistically, I don't think people who are playing at 4K are going to be playing with the 3060 Ti anyways, but it is something that's possible, you know what I mean? So yeah, maybe if you find a 3060 Ti for a real cheap bargain and you're a 4K player, maybe. Or, you know, I'm sure there's people out there who play at 4K and maybe their 4K card has just died on them or something, and they need a replacement really quick, and they don't have a lot of money to replace it at the moment, unfortunately. So, you know, I mean, I know it's a niche scenario, but I'm sure there's people out there in that specific situation. But yeah, that's going to do it for the ultra settings and for the DLSS testing. Let's go ahead and try out the next presets. Alright, and just for the fun of it, we're at 1080p. I'm back in the main menu, so these settings definitely apply. So we're at 1080p, we're using lowest settings in the game. If it says medium or anything like that, just know that that is still the lowest. It's just lowest for those settings is medium. We're not using any DLSS, no ray tracing, of course. This is just going to be to see what your maximum FPS is going to be with this GPU, essentially. If you are somebody that wants higher frame rate, maybe you play multiplayer or you just want higher frame rate, you'll know that you can turn some of the settings down from ultra and make your own hybrid settings. You'll see an in-between FPS, basically. But yep, let's get to the lowest settings. Alright, so here we are, just got back in the game, and 1080p lowest settings. The game definitely looks pretty terrible, but this is how I used to play this game, you know, when it came out with my old i5 4690 with the GTX 1063GB edition. So this is actually how I used to play this game, essentially. So this, you know, it's not completely foreign to me. I know how this game looks at lowest settings, so I'm not too surprised. It doesn't look very good, and it's mostly just like the shadows. I figured out that turning the shadows up a little bit makes it so that it doesn't look as bad, because a lot of the trees just look really jarring, right? Like they're really pixelated at distance. But this FPS, it's pretty good, and we are GPU bound still, which does mean I'm gonna have to mess around with lowering resolutions quite a bit to test this CPU here, if anybody's interested in the CPU performance. So I will have to lower my resolution. So yeah, 230 FPS over here. Over here we're getting like 210, so it looks like on average about 220 FPS on average with this GPU at maximum, or lowest settings rather. Our VRAM usage has dropped all the way down to 4.7 gigs, which is still fairly high up there, right, for like 2020 or 2021. So no wonder I was struggling with a 3 gig graphics card. My RAM usage surprisingly is all the way down at 17.7 gigs, which is quite a bit lower than the 21 that we were at earlier. So I'm not too sure what that's all about, but yeah, it's quite a bit lower. Still higher than 16 gigs though, so yeah, if you got a 16 gig system, you will still have some stutters probably in this game, some performance issues, but the game feels completely smooth here. It's like, yeah, you would expect it to feel completely fine at 200 FPS. This FPS is obviously overkill. You might as well turn up your settings like to medium high or whatever if you really, you know, you want your graphics to be a little bit better and just lose some FPS. But the whole point of showing your lowest settings is to know what you can expect if you really want to crank everything to the lowest settings, right? And you'll know what kind of FPS to expect if you play at medium or medium high, right? You'll see an in-between FPS between ultra and low. So I think that's enough for 1080p. Let's switch it over to 1440. I'm expecting pretty good FPS still. Alright, so I've gone ahead and switched it over to 1440p, still at lowest settings, no DLSS of course. Let's see what it's like. You know what would be funny? If I turned ray tracing on low settings? No, I'm not doing it, but could you imagine? I'm not doing it. But yeah, that would be a funny test for sure. I think it'd just be so overkill having everything looking ugly as hell on lowest settings, then just turning ray tracing on and probably losing half our performance still. Like, it would just make no sense. But you know, I wonder if there's anybody that plays like that unknowingly, you know, like somebody who doesn't necessarily like play video games very much and they don't know what the settings do, and they just turn ray tracing on and they don't realize just how bad it is and they're playing on low settings. I don't know, man. There's probably not very many people, but I guarantee there's at least like 1 or 2 people out there doing that. unknowingly. Those poor souls. But yeah, here at 1440p, surprisingly, I'm not actually getting as high FPS as I thought I would be getting. Oh my god. I mean, we do get 160, 180 and stuff when we look over there, but like when we look over this way, we get like 140. So still not 144 hertz, but I'm just nitpicking. It's still totally fine. Feels fine, guys. VRAM usage creeped up a little bit. You know, we're nearly at 5 gigs, so yeah. I'm gonna have to retest this with my old GTX cards and see what the performance is like. The only reason I've not done that is because I don't have the Battle.net launcher on my old PC anymore. So I'll have to give it a download and give it a go. But that's gonna do it for 1440. Alright, and here we are. We're at 4K resolution using lowest settings in the game. It doesn't make any sense, but we'll give it a go anyways. So 4K low settings, or lowest settings I should say, is still completely fine for zombies at least. It still feels fine. We're at like 70s, which is not exactly that high, but yeah, if you're just going to play the zombies game mode, definitely still okay. If you're looking to play competitive though, then probably not. But then again, I think most competitive players are playing at 1440p and 1080p, right? Not 4K. VRAM usage has creeped all the way up to nearly 6 gigs. That's quite a large jump in VRAM usage there, to be honest. But yeah, still totally fine. Absolutely. 1% low is just below 60, so not exactly perfect, but not terrible either. The game is very ugly here at 4K. All right, well, that's going to do it here for lowest settings 4K. Let's do the final test, which is going to be seeing what this CPU is capable of inside of Call of Duty. And to do that, we have to lower our resolution a hell of a lot, probably. All right, so I've got the game set to 720p, absolute lowest settings in the game. The game looks really blurry here in the menu. The maximum FPS that this game seems to have capped by default in the menu is 335, but we're not reaching that anyway, so it's okay. Everything is on lowest settings still, of course. Let's see what the FPS is actually going to be like here with the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D. All right. And it looks like, as you can see, we are now CPU bottlenecked. We're not actually GPU bound. And we're getting around 250 FPS to 270, depending on what's going on. It does creep up to 300 if I look over there, and we get like, we do actually hit the FPS cap of the game built in if we look over there. But if we're not actually looking over the least intensive part of the map and we look at a more intensive area, we're still at around 315, 320 FPS. We're nearly at the FPS cap in the game. The game obviously looks pretty horrendous, but that's not the point. The point is, if you have a GPU that's capable of pushing these frames at decent settings, is the CPU able to actually do this? And for this CPU here, it seems like you're going to get an average of just under 300 FPS, which is pretty good for sure for a Call of Duty game as well. Like, it's not bad at all. I don't know why you would need this much FPS, especially if you just play zombies, but it's doable. The CPU is at about 30 to 40% usage here. 1% low is at 170, which is still really high. And yeah, you can see the frame time graph is really quite smooth. I'm not seeing any like random spikes in FPS drops or anything like that. Totally fine. Kind of outrageous FPS. But yeah, that's going to do it for today inside of Call of Duty. A little bit more of an extensive look into it. Do let me know what you think about me testing more settings, like, you know, the ray tracing and the DLSS, and then going and testing low settings and, you know, ultra and then ultra DLSS. A lot more presets that I tested here today. Testing has taken longer today because of that, of course, but do let me know what you think about it. And if you want to see more tests like this in the future, do let me know. Leave a like if you found any value out of this video. Subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, guys, take care of yourselves. I've been Verda, and goodbye for now.